Campbell was putting out some absolute gold yesterday. I love him being the spokesperson for this team. He's obviously going to be the media darling. What you want to find in Michael Bonnett's case is someone that you can trust, knowing that they're not going to give a lot of sound bites that's going to bring a ton of attention. Or if they are, you got to walk somebody out there that you know is going to, really kind of back it up. And not that Campbell's talking a lot of trash, right? Bear Alexander picked up and quoted one of the tweets from last night's or yesterday's press session. So obviously the other side is paying attention. They hear what's being said down in Baton Rouge. But Campbell, to me, is as safe as a guy that you can walk out there knowing that, look, he's going to speak with confidence. He's going to represent the team. He's not going to walk in any type of traps that could, play into what the other side is looking for. If Bear Alexander wants to hang up in the USC locker room that Will Campbell said that they're going to Vegas for a fist fight, then that's fine. But, I'd expect that USC already knows that, right? It's not like that's Will Campbell saying that he's going to beat up USC or that they want to drag USC. Campbell, he could walk that fine line of, the other side's paying attention, but there's not too much locker room, fodder that you can lean on if you're the other side. And from Campbell's standpoint, he's obviously matured just immensely since he's started here, and goes without saying, there's a difference between an 18 and a 20-year-old, especially with the experience of college football that Campbell has already put on his resume as a day one, game one, play one starter for LSU his true freshman season. He talked a little bit about that yesterday and the growth and maturity. He doesn't necessarily even have to say it to recognize it. If, like I'm sure all of you or a lot of you who are in our listening audience, a lot like us, has seen Campbell take every snap of his college football development, right? To see the way that he even just carries himself now, you can tell how much he's matured, grown up, gotten stronger and more older, really, wiser. 18 and 20, not that much different in life as far as experience goes, but as far as maturity, physically developing, and as far as that goes, they put the side-by-side of year one by year three out on a couple of guys the other day. Mason Taylor is pretty obvious. Harold Perkins is pretty obvious, but none more blatantly obvious than Will Campbell. And remember what we thought about Campbell 2 years ago. How physically ready he was, how just mentally dominant and mature he was ready for SEC football. When you look back on it, it's kind of like Noah's reaction there. You almost giggle at it a little bit because of what he looks like, what he sounds like, what he feels like he's going into his third season. As we said, there's a lot of NFL projected draft charts that have him inside the top three. I've seen some that say if a quarterback does not work out this season, and depending on who's at the top, he might be number one. He's probably the best football player in the country this year. And
certainly the safest pick in the draft.
It's going to be fun to watch him in this money season. It's tough to really kind of talk about how, look at that. Just by the way he stands. Really and truly, like,
They put that boy out there on the left in the game?
Don't get me wrong. Like, there's not a world where any part of myself, any age of myself would think it would be even funny to lob an insult at Will Campbell, right? But if he was my boy, if he was my guy, and he, he is, and I kind of cracked fun at him the other day, and he said he was going to come through here if he had some time this season. It's like he's not ready for the fight. It's like and that's what I kind of told him, like, well, you better get your hands up. And he was like, can you believe that?
If year three Will Campbell fights year 1 year Will Campbell,
look at the just difference in the confidence Like, you don't have to tell me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the same guy. Like, look how much more confident the one on the right is compared to the left. And that guy on the left was the most confident dude in the class. And, I mean, that's Bull's son, boy. You know what I mean? All right, so let's roll down the list here. Campbell's going to make your hair stand up on the back of your neck with these sound bites. They're incredible. Here he is talking a couple of days out from kickoff between LSU USC.
I'm just going to play this one first.
Really, I mean, everybody knows what we got to do. We talk about it in the O-line room all the time. We got to come out ready to fight, and that's the end of it. I mean, as soon as we, get off that plane, it's a fight. No way around it. I mean, we know what we're there for. We're not there to go to Caesar's Palace. We're there to go get in a fist fight, and everybody in this building knows it, and that's just what it is.
Have you faced edge rushers who just, talk the talk and just talk shit the whole time?
No, not really.
Okay. I'm just curious.
One more question.
Will, you're clearly a guy who takes a lot of pride in winning matchups, even in practice, just based on the way you talk about Harold.
The representative from the press and LSU is behind Campbell. You can see her stand up on her toes, like she's like, uh-oh, when he says that. Like, that's like the purpose of a sports information director, is to stand there and make sure, like, nothing really, the questions, the answers don't get out of bounds, don't get out of line. And like I said, I don't think it was. And Campbell is perfect at walking that line, right? I mean, look at him. He's sitting back in his chair. He's smiling. I mean, his eyes are wide. I mean, he is as confident as he can be going into this season, and really believes what he's saying. I think he's speaking with some conviction of 10 wins doesn't mean much. It's time to win. It's time to produce. It's time to play for championships and close. Here's more from Campbell. So you just want to start from the top here. Sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of guys on this team, but not only the team, the coaching staff, that we haven't done what we've needed to do the first week of the season, not just since I've been here, but even years previous. And it's not a good way to start the season off. It kind of, sets the tone the wrong way. And we know that we got to come out, start fast, and we can't take, in the previous years, like we have weeks to build up to our potential. We got to come out rolling this year, and we know, everybody in the building knows that.
More from Campbell about what this trip entails going up to Vegas.
That's not what we're there for. We're there to play football. I'm not into all the other stuff. I'm only going to Vegas to play football. That's the only time I'm going to go to Vegas, is to play football.
Have you guys talked about that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows that, we're going there for one reason only. We aren't going to Caesar's Palace. We're going to whatever the name of the stadium is to play USC.
I mean, Campbell he's so dialed in, right? I mean, I love to hear that, and I love the way that Brian Kelly approached this game from the first time he started talking about it. I think Jacques had one of the first interviews with him in the offseason where they started looking forward to Vegas, and he made it really apparent then that, look, we're not going for any shows. We're not showing up early. We're not getting there and taking any pictures. We're not visiting anywhere. We're flying in on Saturday. We're playing on Sunday, and we're leaving Sunday night. This is as much of a business trip as you could promote if you're LSU football, and it has been the case since I've heard Brian Kelly start talking about this game 7 months ago. I mean, and to hear it now from Campbell, where that's just etched into the mentality of this team going up there. I mean, Campbell's smirking off questions thinking that they're going to Vegas to, check out the Sphere. They're flying in, playing the game, and flying out. And I love the way that is the setup. And not that I imagine that it would be any other way, but just to hear the head coach talking about it so far in advance of the game, to hear your team leader really pounding that drum and pounding that message into submission on Tuesday of game week, where, if you're a, number 85 player, number 85 on the roster, or you're Emory Jones on the roster, the second best player behind Campbell, Harold Perkins, you're buying in. If Campbell's preaching that, I'm in. Look at that.
I didn't even know he was 10.
He showed up 10, and then he put 40 on once they started playing because they had another 10 on the team 2 years ago.
My mind goes to Jere Jenkins.
Yeah, on offense.
Yeah.
But that was, I remember that was the deal.
And when you hear Will Campbell talking about we're not going to Vegas to do anything but play football, it's a far cry from LSU in the Rose Bowl against UCLA where you had the entire team out gallivanting around town.
Absolutely. I can even remember a trip to New Orleans. I mean, you think about this, the program here, and we talked about this yesterday with Brian Kelly, and, you've seen we talked about coming out of camp, healthy, again, knock on wood, where, they have third year in a row, this program under Kelly has been, for the most part, more healthy than they have been hurt. And going into Vegas, outside of Chris Hilton, who is questionable, I expect Miles Frazier to go on Saturday. We'll wait and see what happens with Hilton. They've got the entire team at their disposal. I mean, think about this game. Is it 7 years ago, 8 years ago in New Orleans when they played BYU? They nearly had 20 guys that were either suspended, couldn't play for grades, ineligible for some type of brush with something that was keeping them out of the game. I mean, it might have been plus 20 in that BYU game. And to now go into, I was listening to Richard Dixon talk about it. And Dixon is anchoring coverage for Eagle 98.1 and Guarantee with Hannah Griff again this season. And it's good to see Richard back in action. I know he had a scary summer and was able to get his health back and all good. So good to see my guy Richard Dixon back on. And he was talking about it. It was like, we always had to account, and speaking from Dixon's standpoint, he was talking, he was saying they always had to account for guys being out. It was like you're never really going to have the full arsenal at your disposal. Like if these two guys are out, this guy's eligible. If that guy's eligible, these three guys are out. Like it was always, like the yin and the yang where you couldn't get everybody together, right? Now under Kelly, it really does feel like, like we said, outside of Hilton, who's battling a little bit of a nagging injury and could possibly go on Sunday, he's the only one really that feels like could or could not play. Everybody else is eligible, is in good standing, is healthy, is ready to go. And, I think that's something that has been a change under Kelly that you may not talk about when we're running down the bullet points of how the program has improved under Kelly's leadership. But, one thing that you can't take for granted is availability. And these guys have been available when playing for Brian Kelly. More from LSU's team leader heading in to year 3 in an opener versus USC about the LSU offense.
I know what this offense is. I know the type of playmakers we have and the guys that we have, not only on this offense, but this team. I'm just excited to go hit somebody different than my own teammates.
It's been past that time in camp for LSU football, right, where they're ready to hit other people. They're ready to hit, an opposing uniform. And Campbell and LSU will have that chance versus USC on Sunday. Remember, Daily, we're brought to you by Barker Brothers Plumbing and Works over at Barker Brothers. They have 2 trucks working East Baton Rouge daily, and they can help you with commercial or residential plumbing services. No website, no social media, no Facebook. You can just dial straight to Jude Barker and get the owner on the phone, 225-776-2431. Shout out to Jude Barker. His wife, his crew invited us out to the Battle for MS this past weekend. That's where I ran into Hannah Griff over at LeBears. She was the MC for a great event battling muscular dystrophy here in East Baton Rouge. And Jude invited Kelly and I out. And it was a cool night over at LeBears to take part in that. But remember Barker Brothers Plumbing and Works, 225-776-2431. Mention the show and save 15%. More from Campbell. Here he is
Go
talking.
ahead and give Barker Brothers a shout, 6:30 on Sunday. See what happens.
Yeah, right.
He might just watch the game with you.
Get in touch with Barker Brothers, like we said, dial them up. But here is Will Campbell talking about the talent on this offense after losing a couple of 3 first-rounders.
Yeah, I mean, like Coach Saban said it on TV the other day, you can shake a tree and find players in this state. I mean, we're going to reload. I mean, as much as we love Malik, Brian, Jaden, they're not here. And we can't make an excuse for ourselves because they're not here. Oh, well, we lost because we don't have them. No, we have Kyron Lacey, C.J. Daniels, Xavier, Nutt, like all the guys down the list, Chris. And we have to go and play our football, and all of those guys can take a game over. And we just got to go do that.
Built for it, man. Will Campbell's built for it. I mean, Campbell's one of those guys that when he leaves behind whatever legacy he stamps down here in year 3, he will be a guy that came in with maximum ultimate hype. A couple of guys have come through here over the last 20 seasons that have had, elite ceiling hype. Think Jarvis Landry, think Leonard Fournette, think Will Campbell. We talked about Will Campbell when he was a sophomore in high school at Neville. People in Monroe and West Monroe and all throughout Ruston were telling people, heads up, LSU's got a left tackle heading their way that is going to be a day 1 starter. And as soon as you saw him play in high school after his sophomore season, people were, it was inevitable. You talked about it as if it was going to happen. It was LeBron. It was Tiger Woods. It was guys that were coming up where you were saying, look at all the hype. How can they live up to it? And then they come through and they blow past it. They outlive the hype. They outplay the hype. And Campbell is built for all of what we were told he was going to be and more. I knew Will Campbell was going to be the left tackle for LSU for 3 seasons. I didn't know LSU was going to get the guy that set the mentality for the whole team. And if that's your left tackle, if that's your offensive lineman, is that guy that everybody in the locker room fears, that every defensive coordinator in the conference fears, that everybody that LSU is going to have to play this season is going to have some type of answer for, or at least some type of game plan that they're going to have to throw at him. And he is the one that sets the tone, that pushes the message, that's the most physical, and the leader, the captain of the team. If the story is written and going into Campbell's 3rd season, it's that, he's outlived everything we thought he was going to be, and you've got 1 more year with him. And he's the face of the team. He's the captain, and here he is yesterday talking about his personal goals for his junior season.
So have you set any personal goals for this season? If so, what are they?
Win a national championship. That's it.
I mean, I got chills. Really. It's just to see your best player in that mindset heading into year 3 of him on campus. That is so infectious. And what we're not accounting for is like what Weston Banks is looking at that scene and kind of saying to himself, like, it's only going to be a snap and I'm going to be sitting in that seat. And look at how a franchise left tackle and LSU's finest handles it. A guy that wears number 7, a guy that goes to SEC media days, a guy that represents LSU in the captain circle, a guy that represents in the locker room, voice of the team. Look how and what he says, you know what, when it's my time, that's how I'm going to do it. And that's how you build a program. That's how when LSU was at its elite, it didn't really matter who was coaching. It didn't really matter what the voices were. The locker room ran the whole program, where everybody was teaching the standard. Once you got there, there was a standard that you had to hold on to, and if you didn't, you just kind of got weeded out. Laws of evolution just kind of pushed you out the door. And to hear Campbell barking and putting that message out, it's great for us. It's great for us to be able to talk about it, but what it really, is great for is the stuff that matters, is about the young guys on the team hearing that, seeing that, knowing what it takes to kind of hold that line for LSU football and creating the standard that when those guys come up, that's the standard you have to meet. I think Brad Davis is going to use Will Campbell as an example for the next 25 years he coaches probably. Have you seen Ron Cooper, the former LSU DB's coach? Every time he talks to a room of coaches, all he talks about is Patrick Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu, and Morris Claiborne. Rightfully so, but even then he knew this is football Camelot. This is I've been coaching DBs for however much long. This is as good as it gets. And I think Brad Davis is looking at Will Campbell saying, man, my first class at LSU, his first group that he's going to send to the league, right, with Emory Jones, Will Campbell, Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger. All four of those guys are going to be playing pro football next year. That's the first class of offensive linemen that Brad Davis is coaching at LSU. The way that he's recruited makes all of us believe that standard's going to be held up every year. I don't know if they're going to have a Will Campbell and Emory Jones on the line every year. That's a hell of a luxury for as high and as great as they've recruited. You got potentially 2 top 10 picks bookending your line. We can't take for granted what we're going to watch here in year 3 with this LSU offensive line, and I think it's the reason why they can make the run. I think that's the differentiator, what sets LSU apart from their troubles, from their problems. Lack of depth on the defense, the lack of playmakers on the defensive line. Some of the things that plague LSU going into the year, where you're a little apprehensive on making them a part of the 12-team playoff. I think if you buy in, and if you're pushing the chips in and say, I think they can make it, you're betting on that group. You're saying that they're going to win games on the backs of Campbell, Jones, Dellinger, Frazier, Chester, up front.
They're going to have that advantage every Saturday. Texas A&M's got a pretty good defensive line.
Can Ole Miss give them trouble?
Possibly, but I think regardless of how good I think they're going to have the advantage regardless. Now, the gap might get smaller, especially come SEC play, but they're going to have the advantage at the line of scrimmage every single weekend.
I know on paper Texas A&M, but I think what mentally they did to that group last year.
Yeah. Now,
that was probably a long off season for that defensive front for A&M, saying we want LSU again, but they beat them so bad to it was like, see you again next year.
Right.
You can use us for momentum or motivation all summer. That was an ass whooping.
Yeah.
That was an old school, they put them on the deck. They were walking them down. Again, I see it on paper, and I know that they're going to have to get off the bus laced up and ready to play. But yeah, that's to me why LSU. That's why I'm picking LSU to win on Sunday.
Right.
Really, you're talking about teams that if you're stacking them up against one another, they're really evenly matched. I'm not certain that LSU's defense is going to be able to stop Miller Moss, Lincoln Riley, and Zachariah Branch in USC's defense. I think that they can put together a scheme, some creativity where they can get off the field a few times. But I'm betting on when it gets crunch time, when it's time to win the game, when it's time to put the game away, that Brian Kelly's going to look at his group up front and say, fellas, here it is. I mean, we need to control the clock for 7.5 minutes, 7 minutes, and choke this game out, get on a plane, and get the hell out of here. And I think they're going to do that. I think that when presented that opportunity and was when LSU has that chance, I believe that the offensive line for LSU is more dominant compared to the USC defensive line than the SC offensive line to LSU's defensive line. I think that's what the game's going to come down to. And I'm not saying that LSU is going to – I think it's going to be back and forth. I think it's going to – there's going to be some scoring that happens. But when it's time to put it into the freezer, when it's time to put it in and say, don't give them the ball back, or don't put LSU's defense back out on the field. Will Campbell, number 7. This is it. Whistling to the line of scrimmage is how I am imagining it. You know what I mean? 8.5 minutes left in the game, and Campbell's breaking the huddle, skipping to the line of scrimmage, whistling at the defensive lineman, knowing we are about to kick your ass. I'm about to, in a heavyweight town, in a town that has hosted many a heavyweight fights. I mean, for decades, some of the biggest name on the marquees, from Mike Tyson to Muhammad Ali. We're about to just slug you into submission, is what I believe LSU can do at the end of that game and say, it's over. I mean, it's...
Well, it'll be interesting to see because you haven't seen LSU win a football game that way.
Not really ever.
Well, I mean,
2011.
I was about to say, no, there was times when LSU won the game rushing. Obviously,
Right.
They didn't do anything else. But I'm talking about with this group of running backs, Jaden Daniels was your leading rusher last year, and whenever you felt like you needed to rush the ball or win the game running it was Jaden Daniels doing it in a multitude of different ways. Right. The only time that I would say I'm looking at last year's schedule, whenever you had a high rusher that wasn't Jaden Daniels in a quote-unquote big game, it was Diggs with 134 against Missouri. Every other time it was Jaden Daniels in a game that felt like you had to win it. He was your leading rusher. So you haven't seen LSU salt the game away yet. And when you go up against a D'Anton defense, we went over the numbers last show, but I'll go over them again. What he does is stop the run. And so if that's what you're asking LSU to do, you haven't seen it yet, where he ranked first in the nation in rushing defense, 70 yards a game. They allowed 2 rush yards per play. Third in the nation in sacks. So
he had some dudes, though.
He had one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. Look, I believe in D'Anton Lynn. I think
they only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns all year.
I think he's respectful. That's what I'm saying.
That's scheme. Right. That's not I don't think people were going to watch UCLA and be like, watch out for player X, player Y, except for the defensive end that got drafted top 15. But it wasn't like everybody else on the roster. They're loaded. I don't think Chip Kelly would have left if he thought his defense was that good.
Right.
So that's where I'm starting to kind of, because it's easy to say. Look at LSU's offensive line. If you want to be able to put this game away and play keep away, sure, that's a great strategy, but you're still unproven at running back and the ability to do it.
I agree.
Because, let's see, USC's defensive personnel on the defensive line is Bear Alexander, much talked about, Nate Clifton, Anthony Lucas, and Jamil Muhammad. Clifton is from Vanderbilt, while the other 2 were just USC commits. So I don't think that's the strength of their football team. But when you look at the linebackers, they have Arnold, who on Pro Football Focus was 52% in pass defense, but he recorded 107 tackles in 12 games and is pretty much a a run stopper. And same thing for Mason Cobb, who registered 85 tackles with 7 tackles for loss. So the linebackers can do it. So it'll just be it's something to look for because it is easy to say, but you haven't seen it.
Right. No, I agree. And I mean that's why I'm saying that this year's team and the identity of it is going to be built on the offensive line, and that is where they have to establish that. That's where that identity has to be created in the second half of games that you got to put on the shelf. You got to be able to put it away. And LSU is walking into an opportunity on Sunday in which I believe when you look at the two teams stacked up side by side, that it's going to be a game that's going to come down to the second half. It's going to come down to the fourth quarter, right? And they'll have that chance to say,
3rd and 4.
Don't give them the ball back.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just don't give it to them again. And if you don't, you win. So here you go, Big Willie. You know what I mean? Like, let's roll.
And I say all of that, but I'm still going to go with my man Will Campbell here.
Know what this offense is. I mean, I know the type of playmakers we have and the guys that we have, not only on this offense but this team. I'm just excited to go hit somebody different than my own teammates.
I'll ride with that guy.
Absolutely. And I believe he knows
that's what
that
the more
they have.
I think the more important part of
dudes.
that quote is I know what this offense is.
And like, you know, Nick Saban said, like we've all known, I mean, LSU's got talent. LSU's got uber talent. LSU's got talent way, enough to compete on a stage like this, especially offensively from what they've been doing over the last couple of years. And, I think Campbell, he knows that. He knows that this is a squad that is ready to go.